Hello, good morning. I'm really delighted to be today with Sharan Burrow, who is speaking to us from Brussels, but she's originally from Australia. She is currently the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation. We are delighted to speak with Sharan today because obviously trade unions are central to the quest, the very long-term quest of democratizing work. Sharan has a long history herself of engagement with worker struggles. I understand her family was a very involved family into the struggles of workers and working people in Australia. She's been the first woman to be elected president of the International Confederation of Free Trade Unions of the Asia-Pacific region in 2000. And she became the first president of the International Trade Union Confederation as it was founded in Vienna in 2006. So now she's the General Secretary, and we're really delighted to speak with you, Sharan. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us.
Good morning.
I wanted maybe to start off this exchange with asking you which aspects of the Democratizing Work manifesto you find most urgent or relevant to your work. Can you highlight one of the three principles, or do you relate to the three principles?
So all three principles are very valuable. If you think about the current context of the world of work, we have a convergence of crisis. We had, of course, the massive levels of historically high inequality before the COVID pandemic. Now, of course, that's even increased further. And we had the climate emergency. Now, with the pandemic having laid bare the fault lines in the global economy, the devastation of low pay, exclusion from work, informality, then you actually can see that we have a broken labour market. 60% of the world's workers work informally, no rights, no minimum wage, no rule of law, and indeed no social protection in most cases. And when you then look at the 40% with some form of employment contract, like right here in Belgium, it's still true that more than a third and growing have, I'm talking globally, have insecure or precarious work. And our new and emerging platform businesses, which are not regulated under any employment relationship, are indeed a form of informality. So the first priority is to integrate the just recovery across all of these areas of crisis to rebuild a labour market. So the global labour movement has a priority around a new social contract. We've demanded a new social contract. It is about jobs, jobs and jobs, climate-friendly jobs with just transition. And in fact, we know that we need in the formal economy 575 million new jobs. The majority of those have to be for women if we're going to see any form of equality. And if we don't achieve that by 2030, you cannot achieve goal 8 on decent work, the goal 8 of the Sustainable Development Goals. Of course, we also need to formalise the informal sector, and we've set a target of 1 billion jobs by 2030. The Centenary Declaration points to how we may do this. That's the Centenary Declaration of the ILO, Tripartite Agreement, how we may in fact repair the labour market. Because the second area is rights, of course, and our Global Rights Index this year showed you that we have a greater attack on trade union and human rights, or free human rights and labour rights, than ever before. And we really have to look at how you end the impunity for multinational corporations. So the work at the EU level on mandated due diligence is essential. Our third demand is universal social protection. And because there's such a vast gap of coverage, we've championed the call for a global social protection fund for the poorest countries. You can't have resilience or any form of security if you don't have social protection. And then, of course, equality means that we address inequality of income, a minimum living wage, collective bargaining strengthened, but also equality not just of income, but of gender and race. And our fifth demand is inclusion, which goes to many of the democratic principles around work, but also around societies where we need to go beyond GDP and really look at economies that account to the people for the taxation dollars that they raise. And of course, in that context, we need reform of taxation and a recognition that the current economic model has failed. So in that context, our whole constitutional frame is dedicated to democratic rights and freedoms, and that means in the workplace and in society.
Thank you very much. It's obviously it's obvious that the convergence between the Democratizing Work manifesto and your vision, the vision of the International Confederation, is very much aligned. And so I would like to ask you if you could highlight what, in your understanding of the situation, are the main challenges that we face today, or to put it more constructively, I would say, what would you like to say to those who are involved in this democratizing work network around the world in terms of getting their attention, to orient their attention to which main challenges at this point you think we should pay attention to?
Well, having just come from Glasgow and 2 weeks at the climate conference, then we have to act really quickly now on not just decarbonising the economy, but indeed eliminating greenhouse gas emissions. So for us, that means a just transition, because we know that every sector has to transition. It's not just about energy, that's the foundation, of course, but it's also about technologies in heavy industry, in transport, in construction. So pick an industry and you can see where the transition is essential. In some industries, this will indeed create jobs. In other industries, it will lose jobs. So just transition means we have to put jobs at the heart of this transition if we're to build the trust. And that goes to the heart of your principles, because we say that workers and their unions, if you're going to build that trust, have to have a seat at the table in terms of negotiating those just transition measures. Workers understand, and all our polling tells us that workers understand the extraordinary need to act on climate. The fear comes from, of course, not knowing if they'll have a job, if they can put food on the table, if they can pay their rent, look after their families. So we have to do these two things in tandem. That's why we say jobs, jobs and jobs, but climate-friendly jobs with just transition. And there were some breakthroughs at the COP, despite the tragedy of not seeing enough ambition and enough commitment to financing the transition in developing economies. But the reality is that for the first time we saw industry committed to indeed reducing emissions, to getting to net zero, and to understand that 2030 is the looming date for doing more than half of this job, that you can't wait till 2050. But on the Energy Day, then we jointly launched with the COP presidency a commitment to just transition, because you can't do them individually. If you're going to change the energy mix, and we must urgently, then we have to have just transition measures to make it possible. There were also some fascinating partnerships emerge, one of which we're optimistic about. It will be very difficult, but the financing that the 5 blocks, including the EU, put up for South Africa's transition allows their public utilities company, Eskom, to transition away from coal, but it's based on a model that we approve of. There's a strong bargaining council in the company. They have already conducted an impact study in communities as well as the workforce. So the workers' voices, the community voices are heard, and they will now attempt to negotiate the transition of production, distribution, and indeed supply chain creation on the basis of that, of aligning those understandings to ensure people's security into the future. So if that works, and it's a model for global solidarity with workers at the heart of those negotiations, then we would have some optimism that models are emerging that go to the heart of your principles.
Thank you so much. We will certainly look into what is going on. I thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll stop here because I know you have to run at a meeting now. Thank you very much.